Hello and welcome to Aero Innovations. I'm Aero and I'll be your host this evening. If you're new to the channel, I'm a long-time low-stakes pro. On my channel, I break down every notable hand I play, whether I win or lose, as long as there's some educational value to the hand. I give you my thought process and analyze every step I take, every move I make. I'll be watching you. During a hand that is, and whether I check, bet or fold, why I sometimes choose the amounts that I choose, and what types of hands I put my opponents on. If you're wondering why I don't show my face on camera, it's because I don't want to lose any viewers to jealousy. It bothers me to think about my viewers watching my videos with their nipples all hairy and sweaty. I mean, I'm at least a solid 4. Okay, but in all seriousness, if you ever play live poker in Las Vegas, you can come meet me at the Win Encore. It's my usual haunt. I play about 3 or 4 days a week. Well, that's what I might usually play anyways. I've been taking a pretty big break lately. I've only been playing about once or twice a week and usually only on the weekends. I had a super awful month of poker in October, so I just had to take a step back and recoup mentally. We'll get more into that when the vlogs catch up to October. That's why I haven't been vlogging as much lately, if anyone's wondering. But you can always see me if you ever schedule a coaching session as well. Anyways, for this session, we're playing 2-5 no limit hold'em at the Win Encore in Las Vegas, where I bind for 1,500, which is 300 big blinds. It's Thursday, September 5th. We start the session just past 11 p.m. at night. 15 minutes into the session, I open to 15 under the gun with 8-10 of clubs, only the cutoff calls. The flop comes king, queen, 3 with 2 clubs. This is actually a much better than average flop. Not only do I flop a flush draw, but it's on a board that should connect pretty well with my opening hand range. So I start with a stronger than normal c-bet of 25 to see if I can take the pot down right now. My opponent isn't going to make things easy for me as he puts in the call. The turn brings in a 6 of spades, neither helping nor hurting us. I continue for another bet of 55 into the pot of 80. This should fold out all Queen X type of hands like Queen Jack or Queen 10 that's currently beating us, but will fold to multiple streets of aggression. My opponent decides he doesn't care what I think as he puts in the call. The river is an ace of spades. We brick out, so we're sitting here literally with 10 high. If I want any hope of winning this hand, I'm going to have to apply maximum pressure here. If our opponent called the flop with a hand like King Jack or King 10, he's really going to hate seeing that ace, and a strong bet here should get him off. A hand like the ace-high nut flush draw will call almost any bet here, but since we're holding 2 of the clubs, that sort of hand is less likely. 10 Jack will definitely raise us, but we're folding to any resistance anyways. So I slam out a massive full pot size bet of 175, only to get immediately snap called. Whoops. Wah, wah, wah. I table my hand, and my opponent shows ace-jack offsuit for a missed gut shot draw with 1 card over that actually hit. Normally, I would top back off to 1,500 after this hand, but as I look down at my notes, I notice I never rebought once this session. I remember now that I forgot to bring my poker satchel before heading to the casino on this day, so I actually only had enough for 1 buy-in, and I was also propping my phone up against my chips to record instead of my usual phone holder. Sad times. Sad start. Let's hope things pick up. The very next hand, Jonathan from the Absolute Nuts live streaming channel opens to 20 with his very first hand in the cutoff with a short stack of 600 that he just bought in with. The button calls. I'm staring down at my least favorite premium starting hand. Oh yes, we're talking about pocket kings. The Dallas Cowboys. I'm also in a pretty crappy position in the big blind, so I 3-bet to 85. Jonathan calls, but the button folds. The flop comes, and it's a good one. We're talking about ace, 8, queen, rainbow. You know, everyone's favorite flop when they have pocket kings. This is only supposed to happen 1 in 5 times. I swear I see an ace on the flop nearly half the time when I'm holding pocket kings. I start with a disappointed check. Thankfully, the action checks around. The turn brings in a 4 of spades, putting 2 spades on board. I check again. Jonathan puts in a laughable bet of $20. Okay, yeah, I can call for that. Maybe he's putting in a super thin value bet with a queen. Or at least, that's my hope. The river is a deuce of clubs. We don't improve, but we weren't really expecting to. I check for a 3rd time, fully expecting to fold to any real bet. But our opponent doesn't make one. He puts in a 10% pot bet of 25. What is this? Am I a cow? Is he just milking my teats here? I can't fold for that unrealistic price point, so I make the call. And he shows us the bad news that he must have been targeting our exact hand as he flips over ace-7 of clubs. Wow. Just wow. That was a really loose pre-flop call for his short stack, but he played it well enough on the turn and river since I was folding to any bet even just slightly bigger. Personally, I wouldn't have played a hand like ace-7 suited for 85, even with a full stack of 1500. That's a hand that I call a dominated hand in the event I'm holding a bigger ace. So here, Jonathan hits his 3-outer, but he still can't get paid anything significant since I'm not about to pay with pocket kings on an ace-high board. In his shoes, I would much prefer a hand like ace-deuce all the way to ace-5 suited that can also make a straight as opposed to ace-6 to ace-9, which kinda lands in no man's land. With one of those types of hands, I'm probably not calling more than 25 bucks with his stack size. Regardless, we're now 25 minutes into the session and already stuck for $400. 40 minutes later, we're now past the 1 hour mark. Here, I open to 15 under the gun with ace-jack of spades. The cutoff calls. The big blind, who just recently bought in short for $400, which is the smallest stack you can buy in for here at the win, 3-bets me to 30 with his now reduced stack of 350. What kind of raise is that? He's out of position and trying to juice up the pot needlessly. If I just call here, this will most certainly bring along the cutoff, who'll maintain position to me the rest of the hand. So I put in the 4-bet to 130. With a sizing like this, I can either take down the pot right now or play in position against the short stack 3-better. The cutoff folds and the big blind calls, so everything goes according to plan. The flop comes and it's an actual good one, as opposed to a sarcastic good one like the last hand. It's 9, Jack, King with 2 spades. We flop middle pair to go along with the nut flush draw. My opponent leads for an abysmally small bet of 50 into the nearly $300 pot. Sure, I suppose I could just call here, but I'm never folding to a turn bet regardless of what it is, since my opponent only has $170 behind anyways, so I just go all in. If you fully plan to call a turn shove anyways, it's best to move all in first, so you can work with some fold equity regardless of how small it is. It's always best to have some fold equity as opposed to none, if you have a hand like mine that has a lot of potential to improve, but currently not very strong. Let's say our opponent is holding a hand like King 4 of diamonds for instance, since it's his lucky hand for whatever reason. If I just call here, we're almost exactly 50-50 to win this hand, but if I shove, we may be able to get a hand like that to fold. I'm not saying my opponent is going to fold here, but that's just some advice for the future. My opponent doesn't have King 4 here, so he's not folding. In fact, he has all the kings he can possibly have, flipping over pocket kings for top set. Thankfully, a queen of spades hits the turn, improving us to the nut flush. The river is an inconsequential 3 of clubs, so we win. I guess pocket kings, the cursed hand, is unfortunate for other players as well. With this win, we're back in the green for $35, baby. 15 minutes later, I open to 15 in the hijack with 8-9 of spades. The button, small blind, and big blind all call, so we go 4 ways to flop of 10, 7, king, rainbow. This is a better than average flop. Not only did we flop an open-ended draw on a rainbow board, but it's a pretty good board to make a continuation bet on. So when the blinds check to me, I start with a 40% c-bet of 25. The button thinks 25 is not good enough. He wants to play for more. He raises the action to 85 with the 2k stack that covers me. The blinds get out of the way. Okay, so here's where I mess things up. It is absolutely crucial to play suited connectors in position. Since I'm out of position, this should just be a call all day long, including Sundays. If I hit the bottom end of my straight draw, I'll have the absolute nuts, and it'll be nearly invisible to my opponent. If I hit the top end, I highly doubt my opponent is making this big raise with ace-queen or queen-9, so I should still be good. Neither card noticeably changes the board, so they should both be payday cards. However, in the moment, I decide that I want to play with some fold equity, so I re-raise my opponent to 300.
It's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for him.
This should fold out a hand like king-jack or king-queen. Unfortunately, hands such as pocket 7s or king 10 are still going to stick around, and they're going to just call to trap me since my opponent has position. So in hindsight, I should only have made this play in position. My opponent does indeed make the call, so I'm sitting here regretting my play immediately after making it. The turn is a king of clubs. This is quite possibly the worst card in the deck for me to continue bluffing on. If my opponent had king 10, pocket 7s, or even just a good assessment of the situation with one pair hands like king jack and king queen, he's never folding on this turn. So of course I have to check. My opponent checks the action back, which isn't completely telling. I personally wouldn't check back here even if I had the nuts with a hand like king 10 because we're playing deep stack. This isn't your typical 100 big blind game. When you play deep stack, oftentimes you'll bet even with the nuts because you want to win a bigger pot. Everyone plays differently though, and some opponents like to trap when they're nutted. So the river comes and it's a queen of hearts. I'm sitting here with 9 high in a nearly $700 pot. Unfortunately, with the run out and my position, I can't do anything. My opponent just called a $300 flop bet. I can only assume he has something monstrous. That turn is just really bad for me. So I just give up and check. My opponent checks as well. I table my 9 high, and surprise, surprise, it's no good. My opponent shows he also missed a straight draw, but with Jack Queen of diamonds. Okay, so now let's replay this hand, but switch the positions. Let's say it's our opponent who bet the 25, and we're the ones who raised to 85 in position. Well, when the next king hits the turn, we can very easily continue with another strong bet, but our opponent, with his Jack Queen who's currently beating us, has a very decent chance of just folding since he'll be concerned about drawing dead. Or let's say it's our opponent who check raised to 85, but we still have position in this hypothetical scenario. Well, similar to our own thought pattern, that king on the turn will most likely shut him down as well. We will take the free card and just check the action back. But when he checks again on the river, that would give us the green light to go ahead and steal the pot. See how this hand could have gone so much differently if we had position? That's why suited connectors are infinitely better in position. I played this hand too aggressively out of position, and it cost me an extra $215, putting us back into the negatives again. For this next hand, the button opens to 15. The small blind folds. I have Jack 9 offsuit in the big blind, which is a pretty weak hand, but button open ranges against the blinds are generally pretty weak themselves, so I'll defend with this hand maybe half the time. I don't like to do anything 100% of the time, otherwise you become too exploitable, so I do make the call here. We go to a flop, which comes king, queen, 4 with 2 spades. We flop a gut shot draw with the backdoor spade draw as well. Nothing to see here. I check, fully planning to fold to any pot size bet. I don't plan to call with a gut shot draw out of position when our opponent might just be c-betting with a hand that won't pay us off anyways. Thankfully, our opponent checks the action back, so we get a free card. We see a turn, and it's a turn we really like seeing. It's a 10 of clubs, giving us the second nut straight.
I don't lose! I win! I win! That's my job! That's what I do!
We're only losing to ace jack, which is a hand that would probably c-bet on that flop. Time to start piling chips in. I lead with a $25 bet into the $30 pot. Our opponent quickly makes the call. The river is clean in the form of a 2 of hearts. I smash again with another pot-size bet of 75. Notice I'm not trying to milk my opponent with weak half-pot or third-pot bets. If I ever hit a miracle gut shot, I want to get paid the max. Our opponent doesn't believe us, so he pays us off, and I table the winner. Here, the +1 opens to 15. The hijack calls. I call with ace-5 of spades in the cutoff, and the big blind comes along as well. We go four-handed in position to a flop of queen, 9, 10, all spades. We flop the ace-high flush, but it's not the nuts. There are 2 different combinations of straight flushes out there. When the action checks over to me, I lead with the third pot size bet of 20. Notice I don't check the action back. I can't emphasize enough never to slow play unless you have a completely nutted hand that's unlikely to get any action given the board texture, like pocket queens on a queen 3-3 rainbow flop or something. Here, the big blind and hijack both call. The turn is the worst imaginable turn I can possibly think of. It's the jack of spades.
Oh! Ew! Dude! What the fuck?
The 8 or king of spades both make straight flushes, and worse yet, there's no way I can get any further action from any one pair type of holding. I'm holding the ace of spades, so what do my opponents have? A king of spades is the most likely suspect, so this just gets checked around. The river is an inconsequential deuce of hearts. Big blind checks. The hijack leads with a tiny bet of 25. That's not telling at all given this board texture. Imagine having a queen high flush on a board with 4 cards of the same suit, so that you're only using one of your cards to make a flush. Would you ever raise with that sort of hand knowing that a simple king or an ace beats you? No, right? Well, that's exactly how I feel holding the ace of spades on this board. I'm not about to fold, but raising is the absolute wrong play to make here, so I just call. The big blind gets out of the way. Our opponent says he doesn't have anything, so I just table our hand, thankful not to get one-outered. For this hand, I open to 15 under the gun with pocket 7s. The +1, middle position, low jack, and small blind all call. The big blind thinks this will be a good squeezing opportunity given the $75 of trapped money and his short stacks of 500, so he 3-bets to 65. That's reasonable enough. Assuming we're behind, his price point gives me exactly what we need to set mine, So I make the call for 50 more. If he had raised to 100 instead of 65, I would have just folded since he's not deep enough. Suddenly, the +1, who only just called the $15 raise, shoves all in for $291. He's a very loose player who's been spewing so far. Everyone else quickly gets out of the way, except for the big blind, who makes the call, keeping just over $200 in reserve. Okay, something very important just happened. Can anyone guess what it is? If you were the big blind and you had a big hand, one guy goes all in for almost $300 and you only have 500, plus there's other trapped money. Would you ever just call here? Keep in mind bro only has $500, not 1,500. If he had something closer to 1,500, I can justify the flat call because he can plausibly try to trap me to win additional money. However, with his short stack, with any made hand, he would have just shoved. If you watch my vlog regularly, you would have seen me fold pocket jacks pre-flop to a $200 effective raise since I wasn't getting the right price to set mine. Here, I only have pocket 7s, and I am definitely not getting the right price to set mine. Can anyone guess why I might be insane enough to call here? I'll give you a few seconds to think about it. There's only one reason. I'm only ever calling here if I feel that I'm ahead. And I have to believe that I'm ahead with massive confidence. I mean, I'm not Wolfgang. I don't have thousands of dollars to spew to 4 and 5 bets with pocket 7s. If you watch the vlog regularly, you would know that I have incredibly strong reads. Okay, so the +1, who's a loose player, flat calls my 15, but then suddenly changes his mind and feels he has a hand worth shoving for nearly 300. The big blind sees all of this action with a $500 stack, but he doesn't reshove. These are both cues I'm using to make my assessment. Not only do I think I'm ahead, but I think they're sharing tons of outs. They most likely both have high card types of hands, with one or both of them having ace-10 or ace-jack. So believe it or not, I make the call. The flop comes king, jack, 6, rainbow. Suddenly, the big blind shoves for his remaining $200 and some change. Of course, I make the easy laydown. He shows ace-jack offsuit, and the +1 shows ace-6 of hearts. The turn is another king, and the river is a 5, so the big blind wins. Okay, so now it's time for the free lesson. I have been asked, if I knew I was ahead pre-flop, why don't I just shove and put the big blind all in for his remaining $200? It's very simple, really. The pot will be nearly $900. Let's say the flop comes out all small, like 9 high or something similar. With absolutely no fold equity, since one guy's already all in, the big blind will most likely check. Even if he shoves, I'm going to make the call because that type of flop is not going to be in his range. And if he checks, then at this point, I'm going to be the one that goes all in. With all of the dead money, he'll be forced to call with nothing but 2 random overcards. That'll give him about 26% against my hand. Why should I put him all in pre-flop when I know with very good confidence what sort of hand he's holding, when he's going to be pot committed to call a flop bet anyways? This way, I can easily fold to any worrisome flop and save my $200 and some change. I'm getting that money if a flop favors me, but I'm not risking that money on a flop that doesn't. Doesn't that just seem like a win-win situation? It's very similar to when I played 5-10 recently and I won that huge pot by rivering the nut straight when a 7 hit the river and I was holding 8-9 of diamonds. My opponent bet 700 on the turn and I only had 875. I didn't shove. I only just called. If I got a favorable river, I'm definitely getting paid for my last 175. But I don't have to risk it if I miss. It's the same principle. Fully guaranteed reward, but with less risk. Try to add some of these principles into your own game if you haven't already. With this loss, I'm still in the green for a nice and juicy 42 doll hairs, 3.5 hours into the session. This next hand happens 30 minutes after the last one. Here, under the gun limps. He's the ace-jack guy from the last hand. He's already lost most of his winnings between the last hand and now, and starts off this hand with less than 300. Knowing this, I target him with a larger than normal raise to 35 in the +1 with a hand that I'm going to call the Red Queen.
You're all going to die down here.
The action quickly folds around, but the small blind wakes up with a hand he thinks is worth calling, and under the gun comes along as well, as we suspected he would. The flop comes Jack 7-4 with 2 clubs. Both players check to me. If I were in bad position, I would slam this type of dynamic board pretty heavily with a pot bet of about 80 to 90. But since I'm last to act and I have great position, I c-bet with a non-committal bet of 60. I've been asked what a non-committal bet is. It means if I had a hand with two random overcards like ace king or ace queen, I might choose this same sizing. I could have a flush draw, a random jack, or even an underpair like pocket tens, and I could still choose this same sizing. In other words, I'm not committing myself to the pot and can easily exit if faced with heavy aggression. I don't get married to one pair type holdings, even if they're overpairs. On the flip side, I don't give away any tells as to the strength of my hand. That's what I consider a non-committal bet. So here, the small blind folds, but under the gun calls. The turn is a 6 of diamonds, not significantly changing the board, and keeping our hand a nice overpair. Our opponent only has about 200 left, and the pot is already 230, so I just put them all in, and he makes the call. So we go to a river, which is a 7 of diamonds. It's not a jack, and it's not a club, so it should be pretty safe. I table my hand, and it's good. Finally up $397, 4 hours into the session. Here, under the gun opens to 15. I call in the middle position with ace-4 of clubs. The low jack calls as well. We go three-handed to a flop of 8, 9, king, rainbow. The action gets checked around. The turn is a queen of clubs, giving us the nut flush draw. Suddenly, under the gun comes out firing full pot for $45. If this were a bigger pot, I would fold to a pot-sized bet here. With only one card to come, I don't think my ace is any good if it hits with this sort of aggression. But since this pot-sized bet is still only $45 realistically, I make the call. And the low jack does as well. The river is an ace of hearts. If under the gun bets again, I fully intend to fold here. But instead, he checks. Maybe he only has a hand like king jack, or maybe just a queen? I decide to go for some thin value. I put out a small 40% pot bet of 75. The low jack folds, but under the gun calls. I table my hand, but it's no good. Under the gun shows king queen for 2 pairs. I just value owned myself. Very nice play, king queen. You made an extra $75 out of me. The very next hand, under the gun limps. I raise to 20 in the +1 with 7, 8 of diamonds. The low jack calls. The button 3 bets to 60 with a 2K stack, which I realize is a pretty weak raise considering the action. So I put in the call, and the low jack does as well. The flop comes ace, 6, 5 with 2 clubs. Not bad, not bad. We flop open-ended, but the extra club lowers the value of our hand. So I start with a check, and I'm surprised when the action checks around. I would imagine the button would c-bet with 100% of his range there, but maybe he has a hand like pocket tens or something similar and doesn't like seeing that ace. So the turn comes, and it's another 5 of diamonds. I can't check the flop but come out betting here, so I proceed with another check. The low jack checks as well, but the button puts in a stale bet of $60. This bet is more stale than yesterday's bread left out on the counter. Sure, I could call this bet and get a good price for my draw, but why? I suspect that our opponent won't call the river bet anyways, assuming we hit one of the few cards that actually improves our hand. So if he had a hand like tens or jacks, we could just take this pot down right now without actually hitting. So I put in the check raise to 200. Both opponents quickly fold, so we get this one through with our semi-bluff and win this hand with 8 high. Whenever you suspect massive weakness, you can turn your draw into a semi-bluff and win a pot using fold equity on your side. Here, +1 opens to 20 with a stack of about 740. He's a tight player that always buys in short. I 3-bet the action to 70 in the middle position with ace-king offsuit. My opponent makes the call, so we go heads up in position to flop of jack, 4, 6, rainbow. My opponent suddenly comes out betting for $30 into the pot of 145. What kind of bet is that? That's like not even a real sizing. If he had come out betting stronger, like half pot or above, I would just make the fold. A jack-high board is just a tad bit too low for a hand like ace-king to credibly represent that I have anything. But since my opponent bets so small, I figure I can try to get him off his hand with some strong aggression. So I raise that bet up to 140. My opponent makes the call pretty quickly. I'm thinking he has a hand like ace-jack. The turn comes and it's a 9 of clubs, putting 2 clubs on board, but otherwise it's pretty inconsequential. My opponent checks. He has a little over 500 left in his stack, and the pot is already 420. If I make any normal bet here, he's going to feel committed by the river, so it's do or die time. I decide I'm going to try to get a jack to fold. Don't ever try this in a 1-3 game, by the way. Keep the vast majority of the bluffs you see me make out of your repertoire when playing lower stakes. A different strategy is used in those games. I decide to throw out an overbet of 500 to see if my opponent would like to play for his whole stack. We know he's a tight player, so there's a lot of fold equity. My opponent tanks, and tanks, and tanks for a full 2 minutes. I'm hoping for a fold, but that doesn't happen. Eventually, he does stick his stack in, which is for $531. So of course, I'm forced to call for $31 more. The river breaks out with a 9 of hearts. Our opponent flips over pocket queens. The freaking red queen. She giveth and she taketh away. Mother father. We're back in the hole again. Stuck for 300 after finally being up a decent amount. 3 hands later, under the gun opens to 20 with a stack of about 650. The +1 calls. The cutoff 3 bets to 100 with a 2K stack. Holy smokes! There's been a raise and a 3 bet to 100 before the action has even gotten to me. And we're sitting here with pocket aces. Pocket freaking rockets. The best possible starting hand in poker. I feel like Arnold Schwarzenegger watching people struggle to bench press 150 at the gym. Yeah, let me help. I put in a sly 4 bet to 255 from the big blind. So now this is the part where things get interesting. Under the gun, the original raiser makes the call, but the cutoff, who's getting a greatly reduced price, folds for only 155 more. If anything, I was expecting the reverse to happen. I can't imagine what sort of hand 3 bets that huge, only to instantly fold for 155 more without even taking 2 seconds to think about it. Maybe he was trying to pull a move in position with a hand like King Jack offsuit or something. Anyways, we go to a flop, and I don't even know what to say about this flop. It's 5 ace 5 rainbow. Yeah. I was coaching one of my students recently, and one of the hands he had me analyze was when he had pocket 10s, and the flop came 10-3-3 rainbow. He came out overbet shoving into multiple players. He wasn't sure why everyone folded. Okay, so we are not gonna do that here. I do the rational thing and check. And wouldn't you know it, my opponent executes himself for me. He sticks in all the beans.
I feel so alive!
What do you do when you have an ace-high flop into a 4-bet pot and your opponent suddenly checks? You put him on queens or kings, right? I mean, it's kind of hard to call a $400 shove on an ace-high board with a big pair that doesn't contain an ace, right? Unfortunately for our friend here, we're not holding kings or queens, so I make the snap call, and the run out is pretty irrelevant when you flop top boat with pocket aces. But if it matters to you, the turn was a 4 of hearts, and the river was a queen of hearts. So we scoop our opponent 650, thankful to be unstuck. I play for another 15 minutes before racking up my chips and heading to the cage. In for 1500 and out for 1807 for a modest win of $307 after 4 hours and 45 minutes of playtime. This was a really rocky session. I got stuck pretty early, losing with pocket kings. Then I got some huge justice when, wouldn't you know it, I cracked someone else's pocket kings to get unstuck. I was never up massively, but on nights like this where my stack keeps going up and down, I'm happy to just book a win of any kind. If you like what you saw tonight, if you like how I play, I encourage you to please hit that like button. If you want to learn more tips and tricks on how to crush low stakes, no limit hold'em, then subscribe to my channel. It doesn't cost you anything, unlike the poor saps who are paying for my poker coaching. My esteemed fans and wonderful supporters. If you too would like some personal one-on-one coaching by yours truly, you can reach out to me via email or on Instagram. If you're looking to support the channel monetarily, feel free to hop onto my Patreon. There you can find more videos from my coaching series. As always, I hope to see you in the next video.